Thank you very much for joining ISAP 2020 Thematic Track 13. I'm Mikiko Kainuma, a Senior Research Advisor at ISIS. I chair this session. At first, I'll explain the Slido. ISAP 2020 is using Slido to interact with the audience. You can ask questions and make comments in the sessions via Slido on the session web page or by accessing to the Slido URL or the QR code with your smartphone, PC, or tablet. We expect your contribution. Thank you. The purpose of this session is to discuss the pathways toward decarbonization and provide messages from scientists toward green recovery. Our two most pressing global threats are the rapid emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic and the evolving climate crisis. To overcome these difficulties, we need to pursue green recovery toward net zero emissions. On October 26, Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga declared to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. The European Commission unveiled the European Green Deal in December 2019, motivated to turn environmental and climate change in policy areas into opportunities. If the current trend of greenhouse gas emissions continues, we will see the average global temperature rise by 1.5 degrees as early as 2030. We need to respond to climate change urgently, but we face a major challenge when trying to promote decarbonization in the current situation. The impact of COVID-19 crisis is being felt across the whole world, and we must keep this in mind when promoting decarbonization under the name of green recovery. At this session, we'll focus on the economic and social impacts caused by COVID-19 crisis and climate change, such as transition in industry sector, employment, and finance issues. We will then discuss the role of science by exchanging views on how we can respond to the ongoing crisis in a timely and appropriate manner, and how science can contribute to the redesign of our society in the long run. Today, we have 6 speakers: Professor Toshihiko Masui, Japan, Dr. Gabriele Zanini, and Dr. Sergio Lamotta, Italy, Dr. Stefan Lettenhofer, Germany, Professor Robert Gross, UK, and Professor Jean-Charles Ucard, France. They are the members of the Steering Committee of Low Carbon Society Research Network, or LCSRNet. IDES serves as the secretariat for LCSRNet and has facilitated discussion on how to make transition toward realizing low carbon and decarbonized societies at its annual meetings held 11 times in the past to date. First, I'll hearing from each of the speakers during their 10 minutes. We have only 10 minutes for each. Then we'll move on to the discussion. During the presentation, we will ring a bell for our timekeeping. One bell indicates that you have another 3 minutes, and 2 bells indicate you have run out of your presentation time. First, let me introduce Professor Toshihiko Masui. He is the head of the Integrated and Economy section of the Center for Social and Environmental Systems Research, National Institute for Environmental Studies. He is also visiting professor of School of Engineering, Tokyo Institute of Technology. He presents on long-term carbon neutral goal and near-term actions. Professor Masui, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mikiko. Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to make a presentation on my, yes, please wait. Yes. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the very good opportunity to introduce my activities. And yeah, so this is the session on the decarbonized society, how to develop toward the decarbonized society. So first of all, I'd like to introduce why how to achieve the decarbonized society in the world. So the IPCC 1.5 degree special report mentioned that yeah, we will have to reduce the GHG emission immediately, and we will have to reach the net zero or CO2 emission by 2050. So this is the requirement to achieve the 1.5 degree target, or the decarbonized society. But the present situation is not sufficient. Even though all countries will achieve the national target, which is NDC, but that situation is quite far from the 1.5 degree mitigation pathway, and also the 2 degree target. So that we will have to accelerate, show the more ambitious target and the ambitious activities to reduce the GHG emissions. And this 1.5 degree target is mentioned by the Paris Agreement. And so many countries show their own long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies. And as Mikiko mentioned, Japan also declared the net zero GHG emissions by 2050 just last month. Before our previous target was 80% reduction of GHG by 2050, but now at this moment the Japan's target is changed to the net zero emission. And so in order to achieve the net zero emissions, yeah, so in the case of Japan, also we will have to reduce the GHG emissions so rapidly. And to achieve that, we may have to revise the NDC, the target in 2030. So this is a present target. And the dot line show that the linearly changed to achieve the 80% reduction. And this solid line show the linearly changed from now to 2050 to achieve the net zero emissions. So the present NDC 2030 target is not enough to achieve the net zero emissions. So we will have to show the more accelerate or ambitious the target or actions to achieve the net zero emissions. And this slide show the typical example to realize the net zero emissions. So of course we need very drastic transitions, which includes the energy efficiency improvement, decarbonized power generation, electrification, carbon sink, and countermeasures to reduce the non-CO2. And in addition to these kind of supply side, we need a very big transition related to demand side. That means the behavioral change. So the digitalization is one of the most important manner, and dematerialization is also needed. And related to this dematerialization, we need to reduce the waste, including the food loss. So in Japanese, mottainai. Mottainai is a keyword to achieve this net zero emissions. And this net zero emission is related to the global issue. So we need the support to developing countries' achievement of the net zero emissions. And how to achieve is also quite important. And so anyway, we need immediate actions like the previous slide. And we will have to consider the long-term viewpoint. So now our activity is quite short-term scope, but we will have to change our mind from the short-term to long-term. And related to that, the socio-economic condition also will be changed. And the the role of the society, the scientist, is show the future consistent the figures by using the model and scenarios. So in the case of the model show can show the future, the vision and the future the pictures based on the existing the system and the past trend, and we can simulate the quite various the activities. So based on the model and the simulation way, scenario development, we will show the many options of the futures. And we will provide the necessary information to the policymakers and other stakeholders. And so we have some requests from the stakeholders, and we will reconsider the future scenarios. And we also try to show the net zero emission pathways in Japan. And but still, this analysis is not sufficient to show the consistent the net zero emission pathway, because we will follow the conventional way. So we don't show that very drastic demand reduction. So we will have to devise this kind of the simulation analysis and discuss with the stakeholders. And at this moment, as Mikiko mentioned, we will have to consider the COVID-19 issues. So we will have to recover from the present the severe economic damages. So, and at this moment, the many international organizations assess the GHG emission reductions by the COVID-19 because of the very drastic economic deficit. But this is a quite short term, and it is not the long term and sustainable. It is not sustainable way. And this is the example of the Japan, the monthly energy data. So the blue one show that the 2020, and the red one show that 2019. Of course, we can reduce the energy demand compared to the previous years, but now it has almost the same level to the last years. And if the economic activity recovered with the present the conventional way, we may have some rebound of the energy demand. So we will have to consider how to achieve both the economic recovery and energy demand, energy saving, or achieving the net zero emissions. So so in order to realize that both, we will have to consider how to recover from the short term, the drastic change, economic drastic change, and the present activity will lead to 2050. So the long-term issue and the short-term issue is connected each other. And in order to satisfy both short-term target and long-term target, we will have to change ourselves. It includes the actions and our mind. So of course, the technology issue is quite important, but we will have to change our mind. And so we have changed several point in our daily life. So we will have to keep these the new experiences like green recovery and the digitalization. So of course this issue is not so easy, but we will have to overcome these issues, and we will achieve the net zero emission or 1.5 degree target. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much for your
Thank you
attention.
very
Thank
much,
you.
Professor Masui. Next, I invite Dr. Gabriele Zanini. He is a research director, Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, ENEA, Italy. His presentation is followed by presentation by Dr. Sergio Lamotta. He's also a researcher at ENEA. Well, let's start Gabriel's presentation entitled The Pandemic Crisis and Lockdown in Italy, What Lessons to Draw. Afterwards, Sergio will be presenting on Italian National Recovery and Resilience Program. So Gabriele and Sergio, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Could you see the screen and my presentation? Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. Yes. What occurred during the lockdown is an exceptional and we hope unique event, and represents a great involuntary experiment in order to search a relationship between emission and air quality or air pollutants and CO2 trends. We set up a project in Italy named Pulvirus, from ancient Latin pulvis, which means dust, and virus, obviously. And we try to understand the link between air pollution and the spread of a pandemic. It was a very controversial debate in Italy and also in Europe around this point. And the physical, chemical, biological interaction between fine particles and viruses, how fine particles could be booster or a sort of carrier for viruses. And we study also the effect of the lockdown on air pollution and greenhouse gases. In the last column in this slide, you can see the reduction of emission percentage for different sectors in, for example, energy production counted a reduction of 8%, around 8%, industry 7%, and transport more than 13%, eating 6%, and also industrial processes and solvent emission around 2% of reduction in emission. The total estimated on annual basis is minus 7.5%. As you can see, only the emission from agriculture and livestock are not moved, obviously, because agriculture and livestock still have activities during the lockdown. And also agriculture, emission from agriculture are important for ammonia emission, and ammonia from farms and from the use of urea-based fertilizer are one of the main components of the secondary particulate matter. Secondary because it's not directly emitted from the emission, but it formed along its fate in the atmosphere. This is a trend in NO2 concentration in the Milan area in the Po Valley during the period from January 10 to October. And during this period, the 21st of February, 29th of May, is period characterized by lockdown. You can see a trend in a reduction for NO2 concentration in the air, still lasting also during summer. And these are two different simulations by chemical transport, two different chemical transport models, but the two models are agree in detecting reduction in PM10 concentration in the Po Valley during the lockdown upper, and during the lockdown with more restriction to agriculture in the lower picture. You can see a reduction from around 15–20% in PM10 concentration during the lockdown. In this case, with more restriction on agriculture emission, you can see that in Milan and in Turin, the reduction of PM10 concentration are more effective. And what's about CO2? We have a small piece of desert, a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, closer to the African coast than the Italy one, Lampedusa, and we have a point, a measurement point for CO2, and you can see the trend of CO2. The trend is increasing in CO2 concentration. And this is the variability, annual and monthly variability of CO2. The annual growth is 2.6 ppm for years. The amplitude of the annual cycle is around 10 ppm, and the amplitude of the semester is around 3 ppm. Okay. But also, in spite of the fact Lampedusa is at the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, there is the possibility to air masses to pollute also this remote site. And you can see the trajectory of the CO air masses from the eastern fires. Many fires were in that period in Russia, and they reached Lampedusa. And so in the red box, you can see the concentration of the CO during the period. This is the signal in CO2 in town, in Gartow, a city in Germany, and the variability in the red squared is reduced during the lockdown month. But there is a clear evidence of a reduction in urban CO2 emission as a result of lockdown, but not in the general trend. This is also a slide to resume that COVID-19 may result in a 6% drop in greenhouse gas emission for 2020, but this is still short of the 7.6% annual reduction required to limit global warming to 1.5 degree. So the path to decarbonization is still difficult. So some conclusion: the lockdown caused a reduction in the concentration of some atmospheric pollutants. The preliminary analysis indicates that concentration don't follow the same trend. The decrease in concentration of nitrogen dioxide seems to affect more monitoring stations than other source, and the fluctuating trends in PM concentration depend on the role that meteorological variability and chemical reaction in the atmosphere play in formation and dispersion of PM. Although CO2 decrease locally, there is no evidence of a substantial reduction in background station. Also, the inertia of the climate system is so strong that the decline in CO2 concentration does not affect the trend in warming, and the efforts for decarbonization must be extended to the planet, continuous over time and of greater intensity. Thank you very much, and sorry for
thank you very much, Gabriel. So can I also ask Sergio for within 5 minutes your presentation?
Perfect. I share the screen, and I assume that I will take less than 10 minutes because this is a slight integration to what Gabriele has said. And just to give you the flavor of what is happening in my country, in Italy, regarding the so-called National Recovery and Resilience Plan, to say that this plan comes and is due from Italy to the European Union as a consequence of the decision by European Union to put in place the so-called Next Generation Fund, new fund, in order to recover from this pandemic. And quite a share of this fund has been allocated to Italy because Italy has been strongly affected by this pandemic, as Gabriele just mentioned. So the idea of tackling with this plan and institutionally, this plan is in charge of an interministerial committee for the European affair. As you can easily imagine, this plan covers a lot of issues because the recovery is not only in the health system, but also in transport, also in environment, of course, and a lot of things. So this is why we need an interministerial committee for tackling this. So what is the context of Italy? This is an important point of starting the discussion because we have quite a slow growth in the last two decades in the economic growth, and quite very few investments in both in public and private investment. In fact, these are pre-28 levels. And also we have a deficit in the expenditure in research and development as compared with other European countries. Also we suffer of a low employment in youth and female. We have quite a gap in education compared with the European mean. This has been assessed by several international organizations. Low fertility rate. So it seems to be quite a gloom, so to say, a picture of Italy. We are not, of course, only this. We are also positive things. But this is just to set what are the problems we're facing. The objective of this recovery and resilience plan are stated in the slide. That is, we strive to arrive to a completely digital country, a country with a safer and efficient infrastructure, a greener and more sustainable country, more competitive and resilient economic system. We also to develop a plan for industry, support plan for industries, which, as Gabriele said, have suffered from this lockdown in the period of March 2020. A more efficient public administration, higher investment in research and education, and in general, a more equitable and inclusive country. And last but not least, a more modern and effective legal system, which is an important mean for improving our economic growth. So the challenges that we share, that we face for improving this plan, which I want to highlight that we have to present this plan within January 2021 to the European Commission, and we will be evaluated from this because, as I told at the beginning, this is a next generation plan, so we are not supposed to make a misuse of this fund that have been made available by the European diplomacy. So we thank all the European countries, especially Germany and France, that took a role in this issue. And so the challenges are improve the resilience and recovery capacity of the country, reduce the social and economic impact of the pandemic crisis, support the green and digital transition, increase the economic growth potential, and support job creation. So all in all, this is an opportunity we have to make the transition because we have the money, we have the potential to do so, and I assume that we are in good track to make a contribution in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriele and Sergio, for your precise explanation of COVID-19 impact of COVID-19 and recovery and resilience program in Italy. So next speaker is Dr. Stefan Leftenkocher. He is director of the Division Future Energy and Industry Systems of the Wuppertal Institute for Climate, Environment and Energy, so Germany, and holds an adjunct professorship in environmental and energy systems with a special focus on future sustainable energy systems at Lund University, Sweden. So he presents on climate neutrality for Germany as an implementation of the European Green Deal. So Stefan, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mikiko, and thank you all for the invitation. Good afternoon. So I try to share my screen. Okay. Thank you. I hope you can see all the presentation. Yeah. So I tried to link the climate neutrality plans and scenarios for Germany with the implementation of the European Green Deal, as already announced. And you probably all know about the European Green Deal. Europe has set its ambition to be the first climate neutral continent by the mid of the century. And of course, that's clear, it will require action by all sectors of our economy. And that means particularly we have to heavily invest in environmentally friendly technologies, support our industry to innovate. We have to roll out cleaner, cheaper, and healthier forms of transport, completely decarbonize the energy sector, and ensure buildings are more efficient. That's about the European targets. And of course, that is will only be successful if we are able to implement it as an innovation strategy for our economy. I will now show core results of a recent study towards a climate neutral Germany. And this study shows how climate neutrality could work in Germany, so achieving the overall target of a climate neutral continent, and give you very brief insight also on the economic upsides of such a plan. As already shown, we have seen in the first presentation for Japan, there are several steps for climate neutrality for Germany. And of course, these steps are not too different between the countries, particularly if you go really zero, things seem to converge. We see that Germany has been successful in the past to significantly reduce emissions, particularly in energy sector, but also in buildings and industry. But still emissions are very high. We figured out, in order really to achieve climate neutrality, we need to go 3 steps. The first step is to increase our policy ambition for 2030. Also, this is quite similar to what we heard from Japan. And that means that we need to have the coal phase out already in 2030 in Germany, and to achieve a 70% electric, renewable electricity system by that time. We need to have roughly 1/3 of our transport already electrified by 2030, which is in 10 years. And in industry, we already need to introduce at a significant scale new technologies like hydrogen-based steel making, and use of hydrogen also in other sectors. We have to ramp up retrofitting of buildings significantly and improve introduce heat pumps, etc. there, and also other sectors are important. So in order to, these are the measures to achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions by 65% by the 2030 already, compared to 1990. And then in a second step, of course, we need to come close to zero minus 65%. And there industry is on the forefront with reductions, lots of electrification and hydrogen. The energy sector, transport, buildings are also very important here. We see that agriculture is rather small. So in the end, there will remain some emissions, mainly from agriculture and cement making. And to really come to zero, we would need negative emissions like bioenergy and carbon linked to carbon capture and storage. And in our analysis, this bioenergy use will mainly occur in industry, because the power plants will now not have any longer significant energy demand for thermal electricity generation. So really, we need to have a net negative basic industries in order to achieve zero carbon in Germany. Some more details on the first 2 steps. Here you can see that, again, what I mentioned before, step 1 is really already very ambitious if you think that's only 10 years left to achieve that. So we really have to be quick now and use all the efforts for the recovery to really convert energy system, convert our automobile industry, heavy industries and ramp up building renovation. Second step, then, although we will have achieved a lot already with minus 65% in 2030, will still be huge tasks. Energy sector to become 100% renewable, industry use lots of hydrogen and introduce biomass in order to be capable for negative emissions. And already we need to have 90% of buildings energetically renovated, 100% renewable electricity generation, and 100%, that is to say, in an increasing demand, because we will see electrification as an important strategy. And I will come to that in the next slide. Here you can see that these strategies, particularly after 2030, but already by then, will mean that we need more electricity in all the sectors. In industry for decarbonization, particularly significant in the transport sector, where we have to have a switch towards electricity, needs also much more electricity there. In the building sector, that's fine, because here we have very efficient technology and renovations, so we can really cope with the same electricity that we now use for appliances. We can also heat the buildings if we are efficient. And last but not least, we see a significant additional electricity demand to produce hydrogen and also to do direct air capture and CCS, which uses lots of electricity. So this is an important strategy to electrify the energy system. And that means, of course, that also renewable electricity generation has to be ramped up extremely significantly. Here you can see the capacities. So it's a 5 times, we will need 5 times the capacities of wind and solar and other renewables we have now by 2050. So, and also electricity generation will need to increase from now 200 terawatt hours to over 800 terawatt hours in 2050. This means that we really have to invest heavily in 10 gigawatts of photovoltaics per year, and almost 2 gigawatts offshore wind and almost 5 gigawatts onshore wind. These are very significant investments. However, they are not really far beyond what we have seen in single years already. So we have achieved in the past, in single years and not in parallel, these ramp-up rates already. But we will need these peak years now to come every year after another until 2050 to be able to convert the electricity system. So lots of investment there. And to come to an end, climate neutrality is a powerful investment strategy, needs lots of investment plus innovation in Germany and I think also in Europe. So we really need to create a fully renewable energy system based on electricity and hydrogen. We'll need to electrify the transport sector, and that, of course, has huge consequences on converting automobile industry, which is the largest industrial sector in Germany, and will have to really reinvent itself. We need to innovate basic materials production with climate neutral low carbon processing technologies, particularly steel making, basic chemicals, cement making, glass, and others are using the bulk of industrial energy. And there we need new processing technologies using hydrogen or direct electrification to get these climate neutral. And this is also technology that will be needed internationally. What does this mean economically? We haven't really analyzed it so much, but according to currently available strategies, that would need additional investment of 50 to 100 billion euro per year, and that would be a strong boost to the economy. It would be 2 to 3% of the GDP traditional investment. And I think that's also a very good strategy for a country with an aging population to really go now into an investment boost. On the other hand, this is simply just the amount of money Germany currently pays for fossil energy imports, which will be replaced by these strategies. So by this, Germany will switch from currently importing 70% of its energy in the form of fossils to producing 80% of renewable electricity. So our energy system will rely 80% on domestic renewable electricity in the end. The rest will be imports, for example, of hydrogen or synthetic energy carriers. And we will see strong co-benefits on climate mitigation, of course, on pollution and health and innovation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and for your detailed explanation of the European Green Deal and concrete steps in Germany. So next speaker, I invite Professor Robert Grass. He's a director, UK Energy Research Center, so-called UKERC. He is also Professor of Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College London, where he was the director for the Center for Energy Policy and Technology and the director of policy at the Energy Future Lab. He will present on green job creation in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Rob, floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Good morning, Europe. Good afternoon, Japan. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm relatively new to LCRSnet, so this is a great opportunity for me to begin to get to know something about your work. So let me just get my slides to appear, and hopefully that now is working. Okay, so I thought so the context to my talk from the UK perspective is very similar to what we've just heard from Stefan. We have a net zero target in the UK, which was signed into law last year, and greenhouse gas emissions are already down 42% on a 1990 baseline. But there's a huge amount of work to do to take those decarbonisation steps, not just in electricity, but across all the sectors, with all of those challenges that we've seen laid out in the German example. But what I thought it might be interesting to do today is take a look at a slightly different aspect of this, and to provide you with some ideas based on some research that we are doing right now to look at the creation of employment or jobs, green jobs, through all of these changes that we need to make to our economies in order to respond to climate change. So I'm not going to talk you through all of that, but this is a very obviously the media at the moment has been full of two things: Donald Trump, Joe Biden. They're two people. That's one thing, and COVID-19. But there's also been a huge amount of attention to this job creation question, and that's certainly the case here in my country, where just a couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister made a renewed commitment to offshore wind, and spoke of us being the Saudi Arabia of wind power. Now, I don't quite know what that means, but there's a lot of attention to this topic. And so what we've been doing in UKERC in the last few months is updating some research that we first carried out through a systematic review back in 2014. And we're specifically looking at the question of net job creation. I'll explain what I mean by that. In renewable energy and energy efficiency through those policies to promote those technologies. So it's a more narrow question than the wide, broad question of green jobs. And I thought it might be just interesting to share a few implications of that and to talk a little bit about some of the conceptual issues, because often in the energy and climate community, we're very preoccupied with our integrated assessment models and our technology forecasting. And this is a different bit of environmental economics, if you like, and something that is interesting to connect to. So there's a whole range of controversies around what might be considered a green job. But we try not to get drawn too much into that. And as I've already said, we focus on this particular subset of green policies, renewable energy and energy efficiency, and large numbers of people, 11 million, however many, 1.5 million, 15 million, 10 million, large numbers of people are employed in these sectors globally. But in order to disaggregate this a bit and to explain some of the sources of controversy and what the issues are, it's interesting just to think about some of the definitional issues and the boundary issues. So there's three kind of basic categories of jobs that could be created. The direct employment in for example, installing wind turbines, the indirect jobs that flow in the supply chain, and then there's the induced created jobs through what's called multiplier effects. So that's in the wider economy. That's the jobs that might be created when people working in those sectors spend their money. There's issues about whether the jobs are in construction and relatively short term, or whether those jobs last over a longer period of time. And there's also very important questions of displaced jobs, impacts on the wider labour market, and impacts on household expenditure. So if this is an expensive transition, how does that impact the wider economy? And one way you can think about this is to talk about it in terms of jobs created and jobs destroyed. Because if we're going to make a transition to renewable energy, for example, we would expect to be, and let's be honest about this, we would expect to be destroying jobs in fossil fuel sectors. That's inevitable. So there's a transition that needs to be managed. That's not my topic today. What I'm talking about today is what we know about what you can see over here, these net jobs. I'm not going to talk in detail about methodology. It would be completely impossible to do that in a 10-minute slot. But there are different approaches to calculating the numbers of jobs and other economic impacts of changes in policy to respond to the climate change challenge. So there may be simple statistical approaches. There's an approach known as input-output modelling, or sort of tables of sectoral economic impacts. And then there's different forms of modelling of varying degrees of sophistication, such as CGE modelling, macroeconomic models. There's also an important macroeconomic dimension to this. Long discussed, and I can remember when I was first studying economics at kind of high school level, these discussions about Keynesianism, whether or not it was possible for governments to create jobs or whether we just move jobs around. And certainly at the moment with the COVID shock, we are in a situation where we can talk about what's called a Keynesian demand gap, which means that demand has disappeared from the economy for various reasons. And I think it's whatever the controversies might be, it's well accepted by many economists that this is an opportunity to create jobs. So just to kind of briefly go through some of the data, I'm not going to talk in detail of this, but this is in the UK context. We can see by far the largest green job in the energy sector is in the energy efficiency arena. We can also look at the employment creation estimates across the EU, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but you can clearly see, for example, that there's a lot of people employed in the wind industry in Germany. I think perhaps we already knew that, but nevertheless, it's interesting to see those data laid out in those forms. And then just to talk very quickly through some of the ways in which UKIRC has been presenting some of this. So you can normalize these jobs. So this slide is showing you the creation of jobs per unit of energy per gigawatt hour. This slide is giving you similar data comparing fossils and renewables during construction phase, and that's per megawatt installed. So again, a slightly different approach, telling you something slightly different again. But in both slides, you can see more jobs are in the renewables sectors than in the traditional fossil fuels on both those measures. And we can see what we can say about net jobs. So that's accounting for the jobs that have been taken away in some sectors. That's a rather more mixed picture. It's also a much smaller evidence base. Okay, just quickly through some of the conclusions to that. So I think we can say that based on the work that we did previously, it would appear that renewable energy and energy efficiency are generally more labor intensive than fossil fuels. And that means across the lifetime of those plants, they create jobs. And so that means if we're investing in power, renewable energy, energy efficiency can contribute to short-term job creation and are likely to be useful, for example, in the COVID recovery. In the UK context, we have a Green Homes grant that's just been made available, £3 billion for people to retrofit their houses, clearly because our finance ministry has recognised the opportunity to create short-term jobs through that sector. However, I mean, if we're looking at the longer term, we need to think about the economic impacts more broadly. When we did this is a very important and interesting change. When we did this research in 2014, wind and solar were much more expensive than fossil fuels. That's no longer the case. And so that means that the economic impacts, the wider economic impacts, are quite different because you're actually talking about something potentially cheaper rather than more expensive, at least in some contexts. Finally, I think we need to look beyond the short-term job creation and think about the transition in wider economic terms. I think that we have an opportunity, historically low interest rates, growing ambitions worldwide, reducing costs of some leading low carbon options. And so I think what we need to be thinking about is the co-benefits and the opportunities to move towards creating the conditions for sustainable long-term low carbon growth. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Rob. And yeah, job creation is one of the most important issues now we are focusing in the world. So next, the last but not the least presenter is Professor Jean-Charles Ucard, Emeritus Research Director, CNRS, and former Director, CIRET, France. So he presents on aligning France with low-emission climate resilience development pathways, reflection about a forthcoming report of climate strategy for the Green Climate Fund. So Professor Jean-Charles Ucard, floor is yours.
Yes, but I don't know how to
So, we can upload your
well, no, but
from here.
because I was when the other were speaking, I saw.
Yeah.
But now, no.
Yes.
What happens? I simply have the only one column here. Let me check. Something here. Yes. Perfect. I think I will do. That's fine. You see here? That's okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Then I will. It's not good. Yeah, but so I go quickly. Well, my talk is just a bit different because that's I would say the more world vision, world view of that, and concentrated on the question of finance because you understand that during the COVID crisis poses a huge problem of finance, a huge problem for the monetary system. I will conclude on that. The question is that, yes, I was surprised when I wrote this report, and I would have said the same thing 1 year ago. There's in the discourse about finance and climate finance, a huge disconnection in literature between, I would say, what is which is on the tragedy of the horizons, is typically a discourse community of central banks, investors, and they advocate for the existence of the physical risk and the transition risks as a source of destabilization of the financial system, and lead to concepts like climate finance disclosure, and in Europe, taxonomy. Okay, then you imagine that you have the people who simply want to green the portfolios, and they have marks, notes, and so on and so forth. And then you have this discourse of the development bank, which insists about the de-risking of low carbon investments and the unlocking the demand side barrier to proposals. Diagnosis is that we don't lack funds, we lack projects. And then I will skip that. The question is that what is really financial risk? Because you have a lot of reports, including in the US now. You imagine that you have two institutions potentially impacted. You have the credit providing institutions who fund the alternative options, and the uncertainty is to what extent they are viable or not. And you have institutions who hold climate impacted assets, generally the pension funds and the others. Now you can argue that after all, it's not a big problem for the financial system, because even in case of rapid climate change, it's far, the pace of that is very low compared with the way in which the financiers manage their portfolios. They change that every 4 months, 5 months, 1 year. So they have time to say, well, there's too many problems in this valley, too many impacts, then I will simply stop to insure people. So the question is that in principle, one risk is that the financial sector can totally have time to disengage themselves. It's bad for society, but for them, they can protect. And the credit providing institution, they can simply have higher risk coefficient of what they are doing now. The question is, in the systemic crisis, is systemic risk is whether we know in the past, Rob talked about the financial cycle and growth cycle. The lesson for the last 20 years is that the financial system is driven by a set of debt, and with ups and downs, and strong revisions. And then in this case, if we have very stressed balance sheets, high level of corporates, debts and municipal debts, which is today, then you can have shocks that create some systemic problems for the system. That's the vision of the bankers, I would say, of the pension funds. And the problem that is the TCFD and taxonomy enough to change that? Well, we find when you look at in depth what happens, it seems that this community doesn't have a real sense of what is going on, because they need the standardized as simple marks to quantify, which is totally contradictory with what we know about the difficulty to assess that. And you have also problems of scope, because, for example, the cement is green or not? That depends. I mean, now the cement is not green, but you need cement to invest in the low carbon transition. So we have a big problem there. And the major problem is that it's not because you decarbonize your portfolio that you invest in climate resilient options. One figure, the pension funds invest 11% of their assets in infrastructure, 37% in real estate. So the question is not to prohibit them to ask them to clean their portfolios. They simply invest in real estate or on purely speculative products. So now the question is not to green the portfolio from the top, but really to scale up the green investments on the ground. And here I pass to the question of the scaling up of low carbon investments. And there's a lot of new citizens report in the community of development banks, and this is surprising for me. That's in Europe, for example, we don't talk a lot about that. We talk about taxonomy, but we don't talk a lot about that. I will not, given time period, I will not repeat all that. You can see that on the screen. The biggest problem is that we don't have money. There's a huge deficit investment in the infrastructure in the world. And this huge deficit investment is totally connected with the business environment we have since 2 or 3 decades. With the business environment, which leads people to invest more on liquid financial projects and real estate and not in infrastructure. But we have to pass to this graph, because this graph is really important. It's published by the report of the multilateral banks, and it's typical that the chicken and egg problems with the low carbon projects. We say they are potentially low carbon projects, but they don't appear on the ground, especially in developing countries, but also here in Europe. The gap. 5 minutes. 3, 2. Okay. This type of value is very important. It simply says that the major risks, they are in development phase of the project. So you can have here carbon tax. It comes too late. It's important is to secure people here, and this has a lot of implications about the policy, because they're risking instruments here. Policy, they're risking because we need stable policies, and financial they're risking when we can transfer the risk to big players and obviously the states. For the sake of time, I will simply say that in literature we have a important rise of accent on multilateral guarantees, because the guarantees doesn't penalize the public funds, okay? Because you only put on your balance sheet the provisions for default, only the rate of default, which is very low, is 2 to 3%. Okay, so this penalizes less the public accounts, and multilateral guarantees because you need the credibility. And with third-party actors, standardization of the processes, and so on and so forth. And since I have 1 minute, simply because you don't, only a few people know that. For example, after the crisis in 2008, the new guidelines for securing the stability of the systems penalize the long-term projects. Okay, so with that, the idea is that with multilateral guarantees with AAA projects by AAA countries, then you can offset that. And now I will simply conclude on some remarks for what is in the post-COVID context. Simply to remind you about the fact that we have a huge problem in developing countries, a loss of more than 1/3 of foreign equity flowing to them. Then this, nice to say, simply they invest more in our countries than in their own countries, outflows. Then in sovereign credit ratings, a lot of countries now will don't have access to capital. But we have high saving rates in our countries, because that's the middle upper classes. We have more money and don't consume, and then you have a lot of savings. So the macroeconomic situation is that you have a lot of savings, a lot of crises potentially in developing countries, and how to reconcile that. Every country will put money on the table. We will have quantitative easing. You can, if you don't like the word, you can, but the people will put the money on the table, even the Netherlands, no problem. But we will have an overflow of national currency of international ones. And this time, simply, I conclude there, is that what we say on the Green Deal, the fact that infrastructure sectors that can have a strong knock-on effect on the process, but we need something which is to recover the sense of gains of international cooperation, to avoid what I just said, and the multilateral initiatives are needed. Simply, I like this sentence by McKerney. If you do that, we simply have a chance to reduce the gap between what capital value and what people value, because we need a sense of where the money should go. The problem is not the overflow of money. The problem is bad use of money. So that's why I stop here. That's more, what I say is not on Europe, is more on the world, but that's important for us also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Charles. Thank you very much. Now, let us dive into our discussion. So, we receive comments from the audience, and thank you all for your participation. And in the interest of time, we'll only pick up a few. So, the first question is, does a digital country imply increased energy demand from computer uses and increased emissions? This is a question from So, Sergio, in your slide, you mentioned about in your recovery plan, completely digital country you are aiming at. Italy is aiming at. So, Sergio, can you elaborate this more about the digital computing country and the energy demand? Some people say the energy demand is increasing when we go into the digital country. So, Sergio?
Yes, thank you for the question, which gives the opportunity to elaborate more on the impact of coronavirus pandemic in the energy consumption and production. It is certainly true that we observed, as Gabrielle has shown, a switch or a change in the way energy is consumed. We observed, but we are in the process of better assessing this data, that the consumption in the residential sector has of course increased, which includes, of course, the energy demand for computers. At the same time, we have observed a decline in other uses, of course, in industrial uses. But this run the risk to be just episodic, not structural. So the idea, which is behind the recovery plan, is to make the changes that we consider as good changes, to make them structural, if it is possible, of course. We made a large use of working at home. I'm presently which implies, of course, a spare in the fuel use for cars. So that is in transport sector. But this kind of measures are not completely and well accepted by everyone. So there's still a lot of work to be done. So the challenge we face at this moment is to minimize the bad impact of the coronavirus and a large and highlight more the good impact for that and make them more structural. Specifically on the question, surely we observe something more on the computer. We are still more on the computer, and we don't have the new computers that consumes less at this period in time. That will need time to do that. So this is what I feel I can answer to this question. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Sergio. Actually, the coronavirus, spread of coronavirus in Japan also, many people stay at home and start working at home, but transportation, the emissions from transportation is reduced, but the many people began to use computer. But I think the also the energy efficiency will be improved, and if this electricity is supplied by renewable energy, we can have plenty of opportunity to supply electricity. Thank you, Sergio. And we have another question. So, if lockdown doesn't make enough change, what confidence can we have in recovery? So, in Europe and in Japan also, the impact we say the third wave in Japan, the coronavirus impact. And I heard that UK also shut down some cities or some workplaces. So, Rob, can you clarify this? And the lockdown has the change a lot, or what lessons from this coronavirus pandemic in UK? And you mentioned about the job creation, but in Japan, many people are now losing job because of the coronavirus pandemic. So can I ask Rob to respond to this question?
Yes, of course. So just on the very specific question, we are now in another lockdown. Several other European countries have also gone back into a lockdown. It's not quite the level of restriction is less than it was in the spring. We have schools and universities open, for example, and more business, manufacturing, construction is still open. But the idea is to try and reduce social contact and therefore to reduce to bring the infection rate back down. We were previously under a regional approach that was differentiated by cities, but it was judged to be inadequate. In all countries, the impact on the economy has been extremely severe. I can't bring to mind the percentage loss in GDP, but it's unprecedented, even including the 1930s, the scale of the loss of. So yeah, I mean, when I was talking about job creation, I was thinking more about the future, and I was working on the assumption that governments around the world will be looking to provide stimulus packages. And the question for us in the energy and climate academic community is to provide the evidence base that can help support making those investments in clean industries, in the growth industries of decarbonisation. Rather than only making those investments in bailing out the aviation industry or building roads or building shopping precincts and car parks, which is an obvious way to create jobs. I think one of the things to say is that in the British economy, there's a very, very significant share of the hospitality and the service industries, and those are particularly hard hit by COVID. You'll see that in any economy that has a large tourism sector, for example, and these jobs can't easily be replaced. It's not, you can't just swap working in a restaurant for installing insulation in people's homes. There's a massive reskilling and training requirement if we're going to do this in a low carbon way. And let's be honest, well, the first priority for governments is going to be getting people back in employment. They want to find a way to get those bars and restaurants reopened. They want those people to go back into the jobs that they were already in. And so do we, okay, because that's the social impacts of this are extremely severe. And the short-term priorities are very significant. And just one other thing I'll offer it's not a positive, but it's an interesting lesson that we can take from the experience in the spring. Electricity consumption was very low. It was sunny. It was windy. The reason that electricity consumption was low is because in the UK context, far more commercial buildings use electricity for cooling and heating than in domestic properties, which tend not to have aircon and tend to be heated using gas. And so what we were able to see on our system was the kind of share of renewables that we might expect to see in 10 years' time, because we want to grow renewables. And so we can learn some lessons for system operation with very high instantaneous penetration of wind and solar, for example. And that can give us lessons both in engineering terms, but also in thinking forward about electricity market design and how we accommodate a rising share of renewables. So COVID is a very bad thing, but we can take a few small good things from it.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, thank you very much. And for me, I want to ask you about the questions and or ask you to give us the message from scientists toward green recovery. can I ask you a short message? The what where we should go, and what green recovery means, and so on. So, can I ask from the Masui-san from Japan? Can I ask you to start the message from scientists for this green recovery?
Okay, thank you. So the role of the scientists show the let's say the good the future pictures. So it is not too optimistic and not too pessimistic. So the role of the scientist is show the options which are consistent with the economy and the environment and other social issues. So the final decision will be done by the policymakers or all the stakeholders, citizens. So so I repeat again our role is to show the options based on the scientific knowledges. Yes, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So you can show the options, how we can go, or options or pathways toward good net zero emissions. So from Italy, Gabriele and Sergio, can you give us some comment or message from your side?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, my message is very simple. The time for chatter and distinctions is over. And this pandemic crisis has shown the weakness of our conviction about relentless development. And the path to decarbonization is necessary and must be faster, more intense, more extensive. International agreements like Kyoto Protocol and so on, free riding protocol, are without any sense. This kind of agreements without a precise system of sanction and incentives need to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And Sergio, do you have?
Yes, I was quite struck by the one of the speech of one of the American from US politician that, in response to some official position, said clearly, "Follow the science." So this puts on our shoulder a big responsibility for that. So we have to take this responsibility seriously, and continue to what we have done till now. That is to highlight the importance of going into a decarbonization pathway. The main motivation is essentially environmental motivation. So the motivations are not changed. What has changed perhaps is the relationship between society and research. Now they have acknowledged the importance of science, because most countries in the coronavirus pandemic have decided to follow the science. So this is important. This is a very important modification in the relation between us, the science part, and the civil society.
Thank you, Sergio. So can I ask Stefan, can I invite Stefan to give us a message?
Yes, I will follow up on what Sergio said. I also think this is very difficult times with the Corona crisis and the climate crisis being very challenging. On the other hand, it's also a moment of hope currently. many important economies have said clearly they want to achieve carbon neutrality by the mid of the century. And we know that this is also a huge challenge. We have to do lots of reconstruction of our economies, but that can also be a chance to green recovery. And I also would like to highlight that the COVID crisis, among many devastations, it made really highlighted how important it is to really work together as a society and to listen on science. So I fully agree it puts a high burden on our work, but also provides lots of chances that societies really will speed up the way to climate neutrality and use that as a way also out of economic problems.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. And can I ask Rob again the message to us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I'd echo the points that have been made by Sergio and Stefan. So the first thing that one of the really important things that the coronavirus experience has taught us is the populists cannot imagine the science to go away. So we have this populist wave of leaders in some countries who like to pretend that facts are pliable, malleable, can be changed. And coronavirus, the experience has been that facts are facts, and that politicians can't play conjuring tricks with the truth. And we know the climate science has uncertainties, but we know that the climate crisis is very real and severe. And I think that the experience with COVID shows us that actually when governments take a problem seriously, that action can happen that we wouldn't have imagined was possible previously. Now, some of that's been quite draconian. I wouldn't want that to be seen as the lesson for climate change, but it's shown us that ambitious changes are possible. And from a scientific perspective, we already know that we've seen huge technological progress in renewables, for example, and that will continue, but it needs the right policies. And that's why the John Charles presentation was so important, because we need to galvanize investment. That investment needs to be directed towards solving the climate crisis. And that's entirely possible to do.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob. And Jean-Charles, can I ask you again to give us a message, please?
To what the others said, I would say perhaps our role now is that we have, because of the coronavirus crisis, this forces us more than ever to link the vision of the long term and the targets we pursue, how this pathway should really help us to respond to the immediate concerns of the people in terms of payment, in terms of certainty, in terms of where the investment should go and other things. So we have more than ever not to disconnect the long term with the short term, and we are requested to work on the recovery plan. And thanks, Rob, what you say. I'm sure that's question of finance and money is really important. And to conclude, I would say, we had the habit of, this controversy between the engineers and the economists. And now we have to add something in the triangle: the engineers, the economists, and the financial people. We really have to make an effort, because I saw how they embark science, the way in which they embark science, and sometimes they do that in a very weak form. And our mandate for the following years is to explain this guy what to do with science, because they are powerful, and I'm not sure that they always interpret science in the right direction. That's simply that. We have to close to embark that they are not economists, they are people from finance, and they have a specific vision of how society works. That's
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jean-Charles. So now I move on to the closing remarks. We have discussed green recovery in Europe and Japan from a scientific point of view, how scientists can help to understand and promote green recovery. IPCC 1.5 degree report clearly said that limiting warming to 1.5 degree would require changes on an unprecedented scale, and we need a systematic transition. So we need to consider a transition in various elements from economic, technological, institutional, socio-cultural, environmental, ecological, and physical point of view. So there is, as the Jean-Charles mentioned, that there is also transition risks, such as investment risk and the stranded asset. Risks come from the retirement of high carbon assets and geopolitical changes, because if we go another aim to the transition, geopolitical power could be changed. So we need also consider such variety of things. But good news is world is moving now, I think, and there are government signals. In Japan also we had a signal, Europe already last year, and business is moving. And the cost of renewables are going down, and investment goes to low or zero carbon technologies. So to go to the green recovery, little time is left. So achieving net zero depends on how quickly we can work on emission reduction now. I really hope that today's discussion will help to pursue the green recovery. We appreciate the questions from the audience during this session, and we'd also love to have what you thought of our session. Before leaving, please take 2 minutes to give us your feedback through the online survey. Your comments are the most valuable to improve the event. Thank you very much.